most complex challenge that humanity has ever faced. But you, the youth, have the most powerful tool that any generation has ever had. And that is your communication ability with each other across the world.
And when we see the voices being heard meaningfully here, and those voices belonging to the oil industry or the fossil fuel industry, those are the voices that have the influence here. And I don't think they should have any voice, never mind an equal one with youth. They should not be allowed to have such an influence in this process.
We are trying to create constituencies of demand for an urgent and fair climate agreement, and for countries to take their responsibility, all countries to take their appropriate responsibility. Constituencies of demand.
A big problem is youth aren't being represented, and a lot of people are very passionate about it.
I think we have to stop pretending this is a complicated problem or we don't know why it's happening. We do know why it's happening, and the problem can be solved quite easily. And we talk about how young people can engage with this, and sometimes it feels tokenistic, maybe like sometimes days like this, we want our voice to be heard meaningfully.
I'm glad to hear that some of you think this is not complex. Believe me, that I don't think that humanity has ever faced anything as complex as this.
It's pretty cool, but it seemed almost like they were working more for representation, but didn't really have much to present.
Youth in the world can be a huge connected constituency of demand if you reach out, as you are able to do, and create youth for climate justice, around the world.
I'm excited to work with other youth through Youngo, and specifically I'm on the finance subsidiary committee.
My favorite thing that I did yesterday was me and Georgia went to a Youngo meeting.
We'll be looking at finance in the terms of how funds will be allocated to developing countries.
And it was just really interesting to see how the meeting was run. It was very, very efficient. People were very competitive while they were speaking, and it went like really, really, really fast. And the most weird thing was they had these hand signals, so if you agreed with someone, you'd go like this. It kind of looked like they were all speaking in sign language, but they weren't.
I think what I've learned from all these years of being engaged with the civil society, especially youth, is that we can actually make things change. I've seen in Montreal that you didn't even have a constituency that allowed young people to intervene in plenaries, and now in 2012 we can actually make decisions, not necessarily by voting for sure, but we can make submissions, talk to delegates, and influence decisions that are being made.
I think better education in general in the classroom, but also just in the community, parents to children, peer to peer, about just the many aspects of life that this issue affects. And it's not just about the climate changing, obviously. It's about so much more than that. And I think that people, it's so complex that people avoid learning about it because they're scared of the complexity.
That is not an excuse for not solving it. We have to solve it. There is no other option. There is no plan B because there's not a planet B. We've got to solve this.
And I think that if we don't know what's going on, if we don't care what's going on, there's no way that we'll be able to make future decisions, and there's no way that we will be able to improve the process itself.
And I'm not thinking just of my grandchildren, I'm thinking of those 9 million and their grandchildren, and what they would say to us. Because we are not doing what we should be doing. We're not ambitious enough. This conference is not grasping sufficiently. She can't say that, but I can. It's not serious enough. It's not urgent enough. It's not what needs to be done.
They don't realize that if we can just educate ourselves a little bit, we can take action, which makes us more comfortable and in learning more in the future.
So you're the leader of Tebteba?
Yes.
Okay, and then what exactly is Tebteba trying to do here at COP18?
Well, Tebteba it's an indigenous peoples international center for policy research and education, but we also are leading the partnership of indigenous peoples and climate change and forest.
I talked with the executive director of Tebteba, and we interviewed her, and I got her contact information about possible internships.
In the Green Climate Fund Board, where they have 2 observers from private sector, 2 observers from civil society, but none from the indigenous people. So we have to talk to the civil society to allow them to give us one space to speak out. But we want to talk to the negotiators here to really make sure that we do have a space as well as observers in the climate change.
And they're the ones that facilitate all of the different indigenous people organizations here at COP. And that was a very interesting presentation.
We have been participating in the COP since Bali because we want to make sure that indigenous peoples come here and really try to talk to the negotiators to be able to put in our concerns related to climate change. So we have a group of people here. We have around 30 people who are here trying to influence the process.
Indigenous people, they really need support networks, and they're really looking for outreach. And I mean, that's obvious, but it's really the degree to which it's difficult for them to find support was really surprising to me. How they have no representative, and I don't know how they're going to find one. And it just seems like a very difficult process for them to get their voices heard.
The most important thing that I learned today was that Indigenous people need to be represented in the official discussions at COP. The Green Climate Fund needs to have safeguards in order to give money to Indigenous people.
I'm going to Gender Day, and first I'm going to learn about a project that someone is starting. I don't know anything about it, for 2 hours, and then I'm going to a 3-hour presentation and discussion about just the changes for gender equality during the conference.
I went to one event that was focused on gender, and it was one of those events where there was like all the really fancy women of all the UN coming together, and I was somewhat disappointed because the title of the topic was moving from rhetoric into action or something like that, and they all just kind of kept it rhetoric.
In my recollection, no decision has ever had so much discussion in the halls, informally, because everybody's trying to figure out how do we get it in despite the fact that all the rules say you can't get it in. So we will get it in.
But I think that's kind of the point. You know, it's like, I mean, just bringing those people together and even having that discussion is really important, even if it's still rhetoric.
On Gender Day, I went to some events held by certain influential women. They talked about a book that they had spearheaded about South African women and their adaptations to climate change, and how we can learn from them and apply that to other areas that have been affected by climate change.
Since 2010 that we put together this strategy, we are having more women using improved stoves.
Well, I think that a lot of people, I mean, gender equality is important in and of itself, but I think there are a lot of underlying facets of importance that people don't really realize and don't really respect. And I think it's important to be able to learn about those things, but also how to communicate those to people who don't know.
I went to one event on gender roles within climate change, and I'd never really thought about that before, but how the unequal representation and how women are typically affected more because of climate change because they're working on the fields and in the houses.
Women having access and control over resources because we are developing their capacities, we are empowering them economically, they are getting more work, more income.
I hope that it can actually move forward because gender empowerment and women's studies is so important in climate change. It's a human rights issue, and I feel like because human rights are not necessarily addressed as well as they should be, moving towards the gender inequality system is a step in the right direction.
The highlights from yesterday. When we first got here, we started walking around and we went all the way to the back of the conference center, and we found the US Center when they had this hyperwall, which is kind of sponsored by NASA. The hyperwall was a bunch of different TV screens, probably like 9 of them, and they were all put together to form a really good display, high definition display. And we watched a presentation on all of the data collected by the different NASA satellites regarding climate change.
There was one really cool aspect. It was one I never really thought about. It was car sharing, and in Brussels they have this company has cars that all their members can just go and use them and drive. I don't know the specifics of it, but it basically reduced the need for 8.6 private cars. So one car just replaces almost 9 cars. So
like your assessments, they're just from
in a big picture, that could actually be really cool.
At noon, I'm going to go to the adaptation plenary because I'm studying adaptation, and I'm really excited to see that.
I learned that equity, it's sort of, at least in the climate aspect, is sort of about like who does the most or who pays for the most responsibilities.
Well, it was really cool walking around, and I talked to this guy that he was doing an atomic energy booth. I learned more about like what exactly happens in the creation of the atomic energy, just the process of how it happens.
My favorite thing yesterday was talking to like the little voices of the conference. Basically like mediation beyond borders, I think it's called, and like those little groups that just have like really interesting things going on.
I think there are many ways of getting involved in climate change issues. Being at climate change negotiations is one of them, but I think mainly if you're in the US or in Canada, the first thing to do would be to get involved with a local organization, to get to know all the issues and learn from people that have been involved previously. And then if you find out that you're really passionate about negotiations, then you can be part of a national delegation, for example, Sustain Us, also the Canadian delegation, for example.
And why you are not using social media to cause a complete and total world revolution on this is still something that I will not understand, and therefore I join Mary and I join Decima in saying, go for it. Like Nike said, just do it.